All right. Guess we'll start with the roll call.
Chairman Banky.
Present.
Vice Chair Baez-Rose.
Here.
Member DeJesus.
Here.
Member Butenis. Here. Member DePeza.
Here.
Member Rourke. Here. Member Gallivan. Member Shea.
We do have a quorum, so we can conduct our business. First item tonight is the minutes from the January 11th meeting. We have a motion on this.
So moved.
Second. Second. The comments, edits, corrections. All those in favor of approving this?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. All right. So our main order of business this evening is our annual deliberation on applications to recommend projects to fund and funding levels to the Lowell City Council. For folks who are here joining us who are not members of the committee, this is not a public hearing, so we're not taking new testimony unless we ask for it. So we did mention it would be great to have folks here so that in the event that any of the members do have questions, it's something that they don't have enough clarity on yet. For deliberations, they may ask you for those questions. But whether you're requested to register or not, we're not taking. We do appreciate what you have shared with us today, both in writing and in your prior presentations. The committee is also not making the final decisions on funding. We are making recommendations on funding. Actual appropriations are made by the Lowell City Council. So this, the process from here is that hopefully this evening this committee will reach consensus about what it recommends to do with the funds. That will be submitted to the City Council. The City Council will then utilize whatever process they deem appropriate in leading up to their final decision about whether to appropriate the funds as recommended. They have two, well, I guess they have three choices. They can honor the recommendations as is, they can choose not to, or they can basically say that they'd like to send them back for reconsideration. What they can't do is appropriate funds in a manner that is different from what the committee recommends. They can choose not to, but they can't change recommendations. This committee has a couple of options, members as well, a couple options at our disposal. We have a little over $900,000 that can be allocated in funds that are available this year. $95,000 and change must be allocated for open space, $95,000 and change must be allocated for historic preservation, and $95,000 and change must be allocated to community housing. The remaining approximately $600,000 can be allocated to any of projects in any of those categories. The committee is under no obligation to actually fund anything or utilize any of that money. It can set it aside as a reserve for future years in any or all of those categories if it wishes. The committee can also make recommendations to fund projects at levels greater than the amount available through two possible mechanisms. One, it has the ability to recommend that the City Council actually borrow against future allocations of Community Preservation Act money, essentially encumbering over the 20 years or so a smaller portion toward being able to make a bigger investment in something. It has actually done that a couple of times. Generally with projects that are that have a broad public aspect of them, municipal property or otherwise have a broad public benefit, that it has not in the past done that for private projects, whether for-profit or not-for-profit ownership. The committee can also recommend to allocate money over multiple years, essentially sort of pre-encumbering money for next year or as part of the money this year. That has never happened. We have not done that in the past, but I don't think there's anything that prohibits us from choosing to do that as the consideration. So with those being the options, we do have one, I think, fairly simple sort of biggest motion I would add right off the bat, which is since there were no projects submitted this year in the open space category, I would call for a motion that we set $95,422.25 into reserves for future open space expenditures.
Make that motion.
I'll second. Any discussion on that? This will be a roll call for that.
Chairman Bakey,
Yes?
Vice Chair Biasrose,
Yes.
Member DeJesus,
Yes.
Member Butenay,
Yes.
Member DePesa,
Yes.
Member Rourke. Yes.
Before we move on, a quick question about that, with the potential also of paying down the bond on Raleigh's. Obviously, we've elected to keep it in reserves. We could accelerate our payments using that money. Would we not?
I think it is possible. I would recommend that we have some consulting with the city's financial team.
Yeah.
Before we make we could discuss that in the future.
Yeah, I'd be curious for the future. I also wanted to keep it in reserves.
Yeah.
But we probably should know if if we, never were to see an open space project again, which obviously isn't the
Won't
case.
happen.
Just out of curiosity,
Yeah.
what's the mechanic there, and is there any savings by doing that?
Well, we obviously save the interest costs. There are a couple of options. Putting that money in reserve, we actually could count future bond payments against future years.
Yeah, we could do it.
Since we've already done that a little, we paid on that a little bit. The other thing, I don't know if they've actually borrowed yet.
Really?
Yeah, if they haven't actually borrowed yet, but also that money could be allocated to the project and actually reduce the amount of borrowed in the first place.
I believe that the sale is complete, so it probably is.
They have borrowed?
It just closed last week.
No, I know the sale closed, that doesn't mean they're.
No, we haven't yet.
Yeah. So we could choose to, if the city wishes, it's not so much the committee, but if the city wishes. Come back to us, or maybe, I'm looking at your
Yeah.
city representative here, maybe talk to the manager and Connor, if there's an interest in doing anything other than what's currently planned.
Yeah, I
Next
have
meeting,
that.
we can take whatever vote we need to. Cool. All right, so then our next order of business is we have 4 applications before us. We had 2 applications that withdrew. So we have 4 projects before us in the open space, in community housing and in the historic preservation categories. In community housing, we have, just to remind everybody, we have a project at Suffolk Place, which is essentially the second phase of Acre Crossing, formerly Suffolk Street, either by Market Street. That is a request for $850,000, and that would be a housing, that would count against housing guideline. We have a project, Mass Mills 4, which is actually both, I guess, it's an and/or. It is both community housing and historic preservation, eligible as either. And then we have 2 other projects that are eligible only as historic preservation projects. Project Vlahos is requesting $265,000, and 150 Middlesex Street, which is requesting $1 million. So at this point, I will turn it over to the wish of the committee of what comments, questions, suggestions, so far.
So clearly the request far
Exceed the available funds.
what we have available. So I think, there's obviously going to be, I don't think there's there might be a project, like a single project that asks for
Less than the total.
less than what we have. And so, I think that was obvious to everybody. I think, for projects that are construction related, I think understanding timelines of what those projects are going to be and when funds can be distributed might help us think about whether or not we're thinking about a future kind of adjusted commitment. So a portion from this year, a portion from a future round or something. And then, I'm relatively new to the group, but this is what, the fourth round?
Third
Third round. And have we basically gone down to, have the recommendations annually gone down to spend every dollar we can?
each of the first 2 years, we allocated all the available funds.
Okay.
In fact, because of the borrowing, we allocated more than the
Yeah.
funds in the first year.
Yeah,
There is no obligation to do that.
yeah.
For a subset of 2 cases.
Yeah, so the open space was the first time we've ever rolled anything. And, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be looking to spend this money. The applications are there, and we have some great applicants. I think the standout here is the Mass Mills 4 building. The cost that they are looking for from us is by far higher in dollars per affordable housing unit. This is obviously a major building in the landscape of our city, and it's very visible from a major entranceway. I certainly would be advocating for funding this as much as we possibly can.
Okay. That one's 82 units. So actually on a per unit basis, the amount they're asking for is actually less. The other project was the Suffolk Place is 33. They're seeking 800. Obviously, we're not seeking 850,000. Mass Mills is seeking 1.5 million. From our fund for 82 units. Now, in each of those cases, like any affordable housing project, they're putting together a whole alphabet soup of funding sources, state, federal tax credits, and others. For schemes and funding from the city, whether it's preservation funds or home funds or both, does go a long way to having some of those other funders come in at much higher levels.
Both of those projects fall in line with, as Adam said, home. And so are projects that, if they haven't already both come in, that maybe is a question for the applicants. Have you guys submitted a request yet for home formally for Suffolk Place?
Suffolk Place has not submitted a request for home funds at this point.
No.
Not formally.
Do you intend to?
Yeah.
Do you intend to?
Depends on what happens, right?
Okay.
Now, Suffolk Place is home ownership, right?
Yes.
Home ownership,
Yeah,
right?
and that's a little complicated.
And just to complete the answer to that question, our price target is at 100% of the AMI and below, simply because of the cost involved and where we need to be in terms of people's mortgage capacity, and the way the program works. Home funds, if we were to utilize those, would peg us at prices that are 80% or below.
So I think if I'm reading this correctly, just for the Mass Mills project, it also, just given the scale, and as Adam said, like just the work of getting a project like that funded, that they can take time. And so the phased funding question was, would be able to accept a phased funding.
Both of those projects, the Acre Crossing, Suffolk Place is requesting funds, a portion this year and a portion next year, which would fall under the registry. Also, still know that we have almost no funds. That is a factor just for the committee to recognize. Most of the money that we have available to us comes from the city property tax surcharge. A portion of it comes from filing fees on documents filed at the registry. And because the amount of activity at the registry is way down, at record low levels, the amount of money we're getting from the state portion.
You know, I guess jumping to the historic preservation project, is it Lowell
Yeah,
building?
Project Lowell.
For the former King Star Cafe, like I think the way everybody knows it, is obviously located right on Market Street at a high visibility location, and has been a vacant property, kind of a missing kind of spot on what is otherwise a pretty active street in the central business district. So it's something that I think folks are eager to see, myself included, eager to see activated. That being said, you know, the 150 Middlesex Street, just given the location of that building and its current condition, and honestly, the activity that we've got on Middlesex Street too, make both of those like really attractive projects to me. Certainly, we cannot give dollars at Middlesex Street, but I think both of them are of interest and are important to see renovated and brought back onto like use, I guess, for the city. The request for the Vlahos building being relatively modest compared to like the other ones that we've gotten, you know, make it one that I sort of am intrigued to see. But there's also that note about the status of tax credits, and so I don't know if I feel like I got the impression when they did their presentation that wasn't sure if our timeline was going to align with their timeline. So I guess I'm curious what the timeline's looking like for that project.
Yeah, the permit application went in yesterday, anticipating starting work on the inside next week. And the timing will probably be waiting for, I don't know, maybe up to a month or more for the funds to be able to tackle the outside. But yeah, it absolutely aligns with, you're talking mid-year or something like that, right?
Well, I should clarify a little bit. We don't know when the city council will.
Right. Usually mid-year.
Two examples.
Yeah.
Past years, it has not been particularly prompt. So we have generally made our recommendations in January, submitted them to the council. The council has used a slightly different process each of the 2 years, so we don't know what they're going to do this year. But in neither case, I don't think they made their final appropriation decisions until well into the spring.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
But like when was the funding?
Funding is available.
And then it's after the contract.
Right.
And then there's a contracting period after that.
We assumed it was June or so, July.
I think that would be the earliest that might be possible.
Yeah,
Realistically.
so, yeah, that,
So as long as you haven't incurred the expenses.
exactly. No, we will be waiting on the exterior renovation until it's funded, and that's, yeah.
Good answer. There is a note in here that we should ask you about the status of your tax credits. I'm curious about the status, but because I'm more curious if the project is completely dependent on it.
Well, look, as owners, this was supposed to be $1 million project. It's a $2 million project. We personally have $600,000 in already. We're all in. We have no choice. If we have to dig into our 401ks, we have no choice. So it is what it is. But the federal tax credits are, the Mass Historic Commission has recommended that the National the Park Service approves, contingent on their approving the final drawings from the manufacturers, the window and stuff like that. So it's at the end of the round 2, phase 2.
So that's pretty.
On the federal, yeah. And the Massachusetts ones we just applied on that. Yeah.
The Middlesex Street, you're not seeking tax credits at all.
We are not.
Not hearing any anybody claiming or arguing any of these projects are not worthy projects. I guess I could suggest there is a really simple solution here, which may or may not be an appropriate one. We have about $800,000 allocated, and 4 projects, we could divide that up for. Funding both historic preservation and community housing. Money toward all of them. Now, if anyone feels that
Especially when I wrote down
Merit-
202.
merit more
202,
or less than
772
the others,
per.
we can adjust that.
I mean, I think I'd have, just given what, giving like unit numbers and just balancing that, I think it's a little hard for me to think that it's just like an even number makes sense for everybody. You know, we're gonna get 4 units at Mass Mills, although Suffolk Place is a homeownership project, which is also something that's really attractive. You know, the Wahoo building is what, like one unit maybe, or 2, but is on Market Street and is like a primo location. So I don't know, I'm saying that, but I also am not sure that I actually have a suggestion for a different way to break it down, other than like on instinct. I don't know. That seems like almost too simplistic of a way to do it based on the project.
So another way to think about it could be that both of those 2 larger projects are going to take a while to assemble the funding. Still could be an equal allocation of this year's money with a pledge of projects. Or there could be a decision to those projects to come back in future years. Not to compete, but make them to come back. Put some additional funding into those. Or should get more of that. I'm throwing that out there to foster discussion because I take a lot of time.
So, I really struggle with the thought of funding only, say $200,000 of a project which requested $1 million, and that represents 80% of the job total cost. I am not comfortable funding 150 Middlesex unless we know that small of a dollar value will make or break the project. So I guess that's my first question to you.
You won't break the project. We have funds available as well, but the challenge we had is we had different investors that we were working with. Unfortunately, there were some incidents in the area. They didn't go for it, so we lost those fundings. But we were able to work with a couple of other private investors, so we can still fund the rest if we have to, absolutely. And we plan on doing so this year, because this is not a building that should be vacant at all.
That I agree with, certainly. Yeah, I have certainly nothing against the project.
Right.
It's a wonderful project, and it's a beautiful building. It just needs a little love.
Absolutely.
I also, another thought that comes to mind is that we have injected a lot of money into 2 blocks in the acre. And while I know wholeheartedly that, homeownership is critical, we've put a lot of money toward this section, and there's going to be some significant changes already due to what we have put in. I would really like to wait a year when we can see the effects of these buildings that will be up and running hopefully by that time. At least one of them, I would expect to start having some tenants in it. And neither of them have tenants in it. They signed some leases.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. And I would certainly, entertain spending more money over there in the future, but I would prefer to not do that yet.
And I would. Great. So I don't want to allocate if we said out of some funds for each of these projects, we had some a little quicker, some of the smaller ones. I think small funding is quicker. The units will come online a little faster. I don't think it is fair. That's my.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we've got two big projects and two smaller projects. All have great merit, I'd like to support all of them. I think that $200,000 sum on change amongst four of them makes a bigger impact than two of them. It almost funds one of the requests overall, so even if we could just say fund the Lowell project completely, you still have, if you divided the three, you still end up 182,000 and change for, allocated to the other three. I know that doesn't make a huge drop in the bucket for a $66 million project, but just the fact that, any dollar shows our support, and if that helps gain more support, I'm in favor of definitely, funding all four of them to some extent. But maybe a little more weighted towards the two smaller projects. I feel like the money will make a more immediate impact. But again, I guess it's good that there's only four, because it's always tough to choose. We've had years in the past where we've had a lot more. And any project that comes to this level has merit in that. There's not going to be a project that's all, not that one. So it's like, trying to be a kid to be like the most. So yeah, I'm in favor of funding all four of them, with maybe a little more heavyweight with the two of the small.
And those are which ones, though, to you?
Just
Lahos
and 150.
Middlesex, okay.
Yeah.
I like his idea. Yeah, funding all four, but seeing the bottles property in Middlesex Street for smaller units to help move those along quicker. And the other ones, because we're going to be waiting a while for bigger projects.
Nationals clearly is eligible for home funds, given that affordability restriction and their plan, and our prior commitment to other previous phases of that larger development. So that's an opportunity for the city to, add to sort of its commitment. So I wouldn't be heartbroken to not give that project as much, just knowing that it's a stronger candidate for home funds than something would be. I still don't know what any of that means as far as actually breaking down the numbers.
You split it in four, and then take the extra 65,000 from Mass Mills and stick it in bottom
Please on that one.
as a proposition.
Like that idea.
Yeah.
That is a motion.
Sure.
Just clarify the motion first, to make sure I have it down there.
Sure. So the,
Whatever you want.
what's,
I was told there'd be no math.
yeah, let me just do it, because I'm not, yeah, hold on.
So we have 811, 89, and 11 cents.
6, 5, 1, 1, 3, 6 minus
Which is the 95.
9, 5, 4, 2, 2, 5, 8, 1, 1, 0, 8, 9, 11, right? Okay. All right, so that divided by 4 is $202,772 and 111 out of 400. So, 30.
Just for those guys that are math impaired, how about we make a slight modification with the payment tab, and then to say, fund the, I think the intent is to fund the Vlahos one at 5065.
Yeah, that's a good
That's
idea.
a fully
Yeah,
funded
that's a
ballot.
better way to do it.
Fund the, Suffolk Place at 200 even. Fund the,
Yeah, sure.
Middlesex Street at 200 even. Balance of the Mass Mills. And I think we'll kind of get.
Yeah, close enough.
I like
Sure.
that.
A little bit of.
Yeah, thank you.
Very good. Humanities majors in here.
I only usually do like 4 or 5 figures at a time, so.
It's
Thanks,
not in
Adam.
the spreadsheet. I
You have
can't
to
add
get your
it.
toes. It's all over. So, I guess can we get a motion? Restate that or amend the motion this?
So the motion is to fund the Project Vlahos in full, $265,000. To spend, to fund $200,000 to Suffolk Place and 150 Merrimack, Middlesex. Thank you, Middlesex, and the rest of the balance of our total to Mass Mills. So that's the total minus the open space with the rest of that balance.
Second that.
What is it, Dylan?
146.89. Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? It's a new roll call for that.
Chairman Beatty,
Yes.
Vice Chair Baez-Rose,
Yes.
Member DeJesus,
Yes.
Member Dukenyak,
Yes.
Member DePinto,
Yeah.
Member Rowe. Yes.
So the next step in the process is what restrictions the commission has to be placed on these funding allocations. Historically, or typically, we have put a historic preservation restriction on any project that is receiving funds in the historic preservation category. That's a requirement. We have also put an affordable housing restriction on projects that are funded in the community housing category. Details of that have gotten us in trouble because it's been really critical in those cases that we not inadvertently create a conflict with the restrictions of the other funders. So I guess I would recommend that we consider having a restriction of some sort, but being somewhat deferential to the specific terms of some less flexible.
Yeah, I forget how we worded it last time that we ended up having to deal with this, but essentially I do think that, you know, the intent of funding housing creation supports the idea of there being some kind of restriction of affordability built into it. And so, but given like the volatility for acre crossing and the way they were able to make those numbers work, you know, it needed to be at like 100% AMI. I think the original vote was at like 80% or something, and so there had to be an amendment. So I think, I don't know if it needs to be super specific, or if we can just say that there should be a built-in affordability restriction and that the Community Preservation Council can match like restrictions that are a part of the project from state funders. I don't know.
Is there, I guess we have the applicant here, is there a particular state funder whose restriction is going to drive that conversation?
So the Commonwealth Builder funding comes from Mass Housing, and there are restrictions that Mass Housing imposes. So that in the case of acre crossing and Suffolk Place would be at 100% of the AMI or below.
So maybe we could just, for Suffolk Place, make the restriction match what's set by the Commonwealth Builder Program.
Perfect. Is that a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Wait a second. Roll call for letters.
That's the board, your request to
What's that for me?
yeah.
All those in favor?
like, that's a,
Probably also mass housing.
but it's a different program though, because you're not getting the Commonwealth builder.
Right.
Defer to mass housing and not specify the Commonwealth builder.
Well, I have a question on that one. We absolutely can, and that's the committee, sure. But since that one is actually eligible for either housing or construction residential, depending on what the purpose of these restrictions is, I believe we could consider this either, and we could put the, whatever is deemed more suitable property. Would note that this one is right in the heart of the downtown Lowell district, and so the other regulatory environment probably mirrors what preservation restrictions, so that can be less onerous, especially if they also are going to be pursuing historic tax credits. Reserve more flexibility for their funding package to focus on the historic preservation side.
Like the idea of supporting a project as a housing project. Mostly just because I think like it's important to support housing projects.
Okay.
But that's not a hill I would die on, so.
I don't think anybody's dying on it.
Whatever you prefer.
Yeah, I mean, I just like the idea of supporting it as a housing project. I think certainly the preservation of that historical building is important for the district, but I think the fact that we're getting net units out of them is to me the biggest like plus.
Okay, what would you like to?
I go back to the question of having an affordability restriction that is consistent with mass housing for their development.
Those in favor? Any opposed? Unanimously as well. The other two are a little simpler. They are historic preservation projects, so I presume that just would call for a standard historic preservation restriction on LPA. One thing just for the applicants to know, we has come up in the past with projects where we have put in funding that is a small portion of the total cost. That requests come back to us asking, well, can the historic preservation restriction only apply to the portion that we pay for? Fortunately, the answer to that is no. It applies to the whole property. Taking this recommendation, one of the conditions of the funding is that there will be a historic property. On the other hand, those restrictions carry, I think you're both contemplating, well, you're contemplating tax credit. You're both subject to the review of the historic board. The standards are pretty similar. It's not putting another layer, particularly other than still exists even if the historic board comes back. We do need a motion from someone on the committee. Second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimously as well. Any other business? There comments from, well, planning board members or preservation committee?
Everybody. Forward.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
These are all very good projects.
If I could just give you all an invitation, Acre Crossing, the residential piece will be finished in April. So we've begun marketing, if anybody's interested in seeing it, reach out and we can set up a tour.
I think I've put an application in.
Good. Mayor Mike Manelli Housing Partnership.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen it about 15 million different ways on Facebook.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks for your
Thanks,
support.
everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you. City staff about when this eventually will get to the city council. Great. Thank you. Keep an eye on city council agenda as well. I wish I could tell you it's going to be on such a date, but I don't think even they know.
They definitely don't.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
We need one more motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
That was, thanks, I guess, from you on.
You know?
When a third of your applicants go through.
I was really confused.
You want coffee?
He's like, no, power down. Like, remember the powerhouse and boiler building were like in my brain?
Yeah, I did the same thing.
And I was like, why would they withdraw? I was so confused.